Hey y'all, welcome back to this week's episode of AMA Friday with Amy Miller, Recruiting in Yoga Pants. So this week, picking up where I left off, started a conversation last week about my experience working for WorkSource, which is the state of Washington employment office. So if you Google employment office in your state, if you are a US-based job seeker, you should be able to find your WorkSource office or equivalent to WorkSource. For example, in Montana, fun fact, it's Montana Works. Did not know that. Googled that, found that out. You can do the same. If you are watching from outside the US, I would imagine your country probably has something similar. I don't know. Sorry. I'm not going to be very helpful in that regard. But essentially, the bigger idea here is these are government funded offices / programs that are intended to help support job seekers, get folks back to work faster, get off of unemployment, and get gainfully employed. So this week, I'm going to share with you my experience as an employee of my local WorkSource office. And keep in mind, two big caveats here. Number one, this was 15 years ago. This was a long time ago. I do not want to presume that things have not changed, that we've not modernized some of our processes. I sure hope so, because they were archaic 15 years ago. But also, this was inspired by people on social media sharing their experiences. I don't know that a lot has changed. So I promised that I would talk about it. So that's what we're going to do this week. I'm going to share my real life experience with some of these initiatives. Next week, this is where the good stuff comes in. Next week, I'm going to dig into how you as the job seeker / customer of these resources can get the most out of your tax dollars. All right? So some really great people work at these offices. I am friends with people I worked with 15 years ago. I have made friends with people who are at WorkSource now and working in various capacities to help bridge the divide between job seekers and employers. I work with WorkSource closely in my current role. I am an employer. I show up and I do recruiting events and employer of the day events and all kinds of good stuff. So I am trying to stay connected, and like I will encourage you to do next week, taking advantage of the great resources and the great people that are there. But how do you find them? We're going to talk about that next week. So here's some of the things that I witnessed during my tenure as a WorkSource counselor. Okay. One of the more painful scenarios that I ran into was a job search class. So we had, back in the day, it was a series of 6, I want to say they were like 2-hour long sessions. They were actual like trainings, and you could sign up for 1 or 2 or all 6 of them, and they covered different aspects of job search. Okay. I know like the first one was like applications, and I know the 6th one was like interview prep. And then there was some other stuff in between. I don't remember, but I actually taught the initial class, the application class. And I remember when I got to take that on for my office, I was really excited because I took this job because I wanted to help. I wanted to improve it. I wanted to get people back to work. I wanted to do all the things that I needed as a job seeker and as someone looking for work. And you heard my story last week. So once I started teaching this class, I get all the materials. Are like, here's all your handouts. Here's the things, the curriculum, all the things that we talk about in this course. And I'm looking at the book, and I said, I'm not giving this out. This is outdated. And my boss is like, what? No, you have to. Like, this is a required curriculum. And I'm like, this is archaic. Like, this isn't how we apply to jobs anymore. Friends, I'm not kidding. The instruction was to use blue or black ink on your paper application. This was like 2009, 2010. I'm not going to say nobody took paper applications, but we were definitely at a point where most applications were online. And we were telling people, hey, go sit over there at that computer in our resource room, it's a big old computer bank, the free computers that y'all could use, and go apply for a job. But here's a workbook that tells you to use a blue or black ink pen. Incredibly archaic. I got in trouble for not handing out that workbook. So I said, okay, I'll hand out the workbook. And I handed out the workbook, and the first thing I said was, throw it away on your way out. It's useless to you. Take notes instead. And then I taught them how to actually read a job description like a recruiter. I have a video on that. I will link to that up above. I have not changed much on that advice. We would go through like how to identify keywords, things like that. So I put a lot of time and effort into coloring outside the lines so that I could give people relevant data that matched the market we were in. Okay. And I got in trouble. I got my hand slapped a lot. They probably would have fired me, except I was in the union and I was also the shop steward. So try me. Anyway. So that was one instance where some of the data, some of the curriculum, some of the resources that we had were just super out of date. Second thing. Now, I've already mentioned some of the people that worked at these offices that I worked with are wonderful. They care. They stay closely aligned to employers and have a finger on the pulse of the market. I love those people. Not everyone was like that. Here's another example. I mentioned the resource room, right? So I had all these computers and you could go sit at them and use them for an hour, whatever, check your email, apply for jobs, etc. We had a bunch of tables and chairs in there as well. So folks could just sit there. Maybe they had their own device, or maybe they were just, filling something out on paper, or maybe they were reading a book. I don't know what they were doing. They're just there in the resource room, right? Not on a computer. I had the idea that I could actually put job postings, and I put it in a little plastic sleeve so the paper stands up. You know what I'm talking about? Like a little display thing. And so every week I would look at all of our new job postings, because companies can put their postings on the WorkSource website. Still to this day, you can do that. And I would print out like the top 10, right? Or the ones that seem to fit our audience. We had a very heavy immigrant population. We had a lot of blue collar workers. So I would try to find fish processing was a big one. We partnered with a lot of the processors in Seattle. So that was a big employer for us. All kinds of like blue collar assembly, manufacturing, supply chain, logistics, those kinds of roles. And I would print out the top 10 and I'd put them in this sleeve and I'd put them on all the tables. Well, one time, one of the counselors picks one up and brings it over to me and goes, "What is this?" And I said, "Well, I just updated the roles. These are all the positions like in the greater Seattle area that our audience, our population of job seekers could be a fit." "Well, this role's not posted with us. This is with the North Seattle office." People can commute to North Seattle. It's not that far. We have a bus. We have a light rail. But this isn't our job. But people that we support could do the job. Absolutely furious with me. This man was absolutely furious with me because I was advertising roles that were not technically tied to our specific office. How archaic is that thinking? My boss loved it. My boss actually thought it was a good thing. And so I didn't get in trouble for that. But I had a couple of people very angry with me over it, which is insane to me. Okay, so that happened. Oh gosh, what's one more I can give you? Oh, okay, so here we go. I'll close out with my experience with military. I love this. So I ended up transferring to the WorkSource office at Joint Base Lewis McChord. And in that location, I actually kind of bounced back and forth between the two offices, one on the Army side, one on the Air Force side. And I worked with veterans and family members, anybody who needed job search support. They could come in, meet with one of the counselors, what have you. We got a lot of soldiers who would come out of TAP, Transition Assistance Program, and they would come to our office, like literally down the hall. They'd come to see us. I spent a lot of time helping people unlearn what they learned in TAP. To the point where the TAP administrator came and yelled at my boss because I was teaching veterans that their program was not up to date. And to that I said, "You mad? Write your congressman. I don't give a shit." And I tried to work with them. I tried to be like, "Hey, look, you're doing, an important service to our veterans. I appreciate that. Can we partner? Can we figure out a way to, I can help modernize what you're teaching. You can, give me some tips that maybe I don't have about, what's required or what they need to do as they transition, whatever." They didn't want to talk to me. They were just pissed off that I was correcting their misinformation. And friends, if those 3 examples do not highlight some of the challenges we have with some of these government-funded programs, I don't know what will. And again, those are just off the top of my head from 15 years ago. I'm sure I have 100 more examples. Here's the thing. I don't share all that to try to convince you not to leverage these resources or not to, give them a shot. There are great people at these offices and great people who want to help, but they are up against sometimes their own archaic thinking, as well as program or curriculum or leadership constraints. Okay? So if you go into this with the right mindset and the right expectations, you can actually still find some goodness in these free resources. And that is what we're going to talk about next week. See you then.